E-commerce businesses are not a new thing. They've been around since the mid-90s. As the weather warms up and your air conditioner isn't performing the way it used to back in the 70s, it's time to consider a replacement. Maybe a heat pump. Maybe you would like a mini split. Maybe you want to retrofit an existing central air system. Alpine Home Air Products has the unit for you. Visit alpinehomeair.com this Memorial Day and save 5% off all Blue Ridge and Goodman products. Use coupon code ALPINE5, that's ALPINE5, through Wednesday, 5/29 at midnight. alpinehomeair.com, serving you since 2002.
Welcome to Everything with Everett. This is a talk show podcast hosted by Everett McConaughey. The purpose of this production is to share thoughts, voices, and information to further a discussion on who we are as individuals, communities, and a global society. Everything with Everett is open to all topics of discussion: faith, science, history, finances, social issues, and, well, everything. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Visit everettpodcast.com for all the details.
That's Molly Miklos of Voiceovers by Molly, LLC. Voiceovers by Molly, LLC is ready to collaborate with you to create the best voice for your project. Molly's voice is professional and clear, warm and friendly, with a versatile twist, capable of snarky and sassy. Molly has a wide range of voice styles to provide a plethora of moods for your TV, radio, and character projects. Contact Molly today. She wants to collaborate with you. All the information is on her website, voiceoversbymolly.com. Hello, everybody. I am back with you. I know, I'm in a upswing on new content. We'll see how long this lasts. So another intriguing topic that came to mind recently after, honestly, a really incredible YouTube video that I saw entitled "The Man Who Accidentally Killed the Most People in History." It's a video on YouTube. I forget if it's an hour long. It's not a short one, so definitely, might be your evening watch one of these days. But I will link it in the podcast description wherever you are subscribing. And thank you for continuing to stick with this podcast, even though it's very infrequent. And I know there are bigger corporate voices out there that might be drawing your attention and competing for your play as well. So I truly appreciate the fact that you are pressing play on humble little old me. So this video that I just alluded to is about a gentleman by the name of Thomas Midgley, Thomas Midgley, Midgley Jr. He has been named a one-man environmental disaster for two big reasons. He was one of the early pioneers of chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. These are compounds that became widely used in industry and also destroyed the ozone layer. Some of you may, if you're my age, you probably are aware of this just from what your parents told you. If you're older than my age, you are aware from what you heard in the time. But aerosols like hairspray and household spray canisters used to contain these chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, as a gas to push out the contents. Well, obviously, once the contents are gone, it still can spray these chemicals out, and then they escape into the air. most of us, oh, I'm just emptying the gas out of this canister, like we're not thinking about that. Hey, actually this stuff's lighter than air. It will go up into the ozone, and guess what? It will destroy the balance of everything that we call Earth. So these CFCs went into the air. It was the great don't question progress in science, and everything new is great automatically because it makes our lives simpler. It's cheap. But these things actually ended up destroying a huge hole into the ozone. And had we not stopped it, scientists for many decades have said that, we would probably get to a critical turning point where we basically lose the envelope of our atmosphere, and the Earth probably would have ended. So thank you, Thomas Midgley Jr. You almost killed us all. So he also he invented several things. He also invented leaded gasoline, and he also insisted that it was safe to use. So we're all familiar about, the hazards that come from drinking. Like we heard about the Flint, Michigan water situation where they switched from their existing water system to a local reservoir. It wasn't being treated. So they didn't do the proper precautions to realize, hey, a lot of the infrastructure is made out of lead-lined pipes. So the protective deposits that were on top of it, think like hard water, the protective deposits that were inside of these generation-old pipes were relatively sealed and fine. But then when they switched to this not so hard water that was basically able to dissolve these calcifications inside of the pipes, it exposed the lead to then be able to be leached from the pipes and go into people's houses, and they were drinking lead tainted water. And that's why, you have to be very careful when you buy like leaded glass. There was a while where, I don't know if it was common here in America, but I believe a lot of like aristocrats and stuff in Europe, royalty, it was really popular to have, really fancy, shiny leaded glass to put, like decanters to put your alcohol in. Well, the downside of that is you can do it briefly, but if you're just putting it there and letting it hang out there for days, weeks, months, years, and then just sipping off of it out of time, you're eventually absorbing some of that lead from the glass into your alcohol, and then you're drinking lead. And then that goes into your body, heavy metal, your body can't get it out. I did some reading on it and why lead is bad. And lead actually molecularly competes with calcium in your body. And so this is why it's dangerous for like children if they're exposed to lead, because it actually can get into the growth plate ends of their bones and actually can stunt growth. It basically just displaces what your body actually needs and uses to function, grow, and regenerate itself. And it just gets plugged with lead, and you can't just scoop it out. And there's lifelong ramifications from it. So an interesting thing that I learned from this video, and I had like an aha moment, and why I was like, do people know this? Is so growing up in a more conservative state where MAGA people, Trump people are outnumbering those of us that don't find themselves easily duped by liars and criminals. So growing up, I always heard the phrase like, oh, you played in the dirt. I let you play in the dirt. Nothing ever happened. You're fine. And I've heard this discussion so many times about like, oh, kids these days, moms aren't allowing them to play in the dirt. They don't get to play in the dirt. And it's kind of been a thing since even in the 90s. Some parents stay out of the dirt, stay clean, the hyper clean vigilance parents. And there's definitely, it's not a cut and dry topic. Like, I don't want you to take that away from this. You do need exposure to the outdoors. You do need exposure to, bits of dirt and, the things that are in the environment, pollens, animal dander, different things so that your body can build an immune system. And so, yes, playing in the dirt as a child is good to a degree. However, but I was like, why, like, serious? We're having this discussion over like antibodies. Like, why is this such a, you vote this way if you don't let your kids play in the dirt kind of a thing. And I'm like, WTF, And so watching this really interesting video about this guy's creation of leaded gas made me realize, wow, a lot like the plastic industry and the recycling propaganda that we were led to buy into. Oh, if you care about the planet, you should recycle. Well, guess what? I can recycle every milk jug I do and don't buy, because guess what? I don't drink milk that much. But just because, you and 5 other houses on the street are recycling doesn't actually mean it's going to really change what the contents of the local landfill or any landfill across the country and the world are, because these companies are so much bigger. If they run look at the dollar store, it's loaded with plastic crap. If they don't sell it, if someone buys it and it's like, oh, well, that, it broke because it was so poorly made, it's going in the landfill. It can't be recycled. So I'm sorry, but every consumer is vastly outnumbered by these large companies. But anyway, so I started thinking, I was like, okay, so they were talking about how we used to have cars that before fuel injection had lead in the gas. Lead allowed the fuel to reach a higher compression point before combustion, which then would give more power through the engine and made a more effective automobile. So the downside of that is when the exhaust comes out the tailpipe, you have trace vapors of lead inside that exhaust. And when it comes out the tailpipe, it's going onto the road. It's going on back in, when all this was prevalent, we had leaded gas for like 100 years. Dirt roads, the driveway, grandma and grandpa's driveway, the house. You walk on the streets and the roads, driveways. Anywhere a car could drive, lead could be deposited onto the ground. Also, anywhere nearby, because if the breeze was blowing, it'd blow off to the side. So really anywhere that was susceptible to relative passage by a combustion engine running leaded fuel has the potential to be contaminated by lead. And then that dirt is getting on your shoes, coming in your house. If you're not vacuuming, or if the vacuum cleaners aren't effective enough to truly get it all sucked up and not relaunched back into your house, there's a lot of lead coming in from these dirt sources. And we're all familiar with, the leaded pipes, or, kids are getting exposed to lead through eating paint chips. And I get curiosity is there, but I think there was so much that was talked about, like it was the leaded pipes' fault. It was the leaded paint, because that's what we used to use. Lead was this great miracle chemical when it was created and widely used because it was the only thing we knew scientifically at that point to stabilize things. And I think that, interestingly, kind of, like other big industries, like the plastics industry, petroleum industry, another sidestep of leaded gas. I really think that if more people understood that our world is covered in trace amounts of lead because of cars, trucks, aircraft, single engine aircraft like Cessnas, anyone who has a private plane, they're the only source of still depositing lead ions, debris. They're the only people using leaded fuel is in the aircraft industry. So, lead's still being deposited in much smaller quantities, but that is really the unspoken issue is all this lead that was put into gasoline that we don't want to talk about, but we blamed it on the water pipes and the paint at grandma's house. But in reality, for 100 years, we have 100 years of topsoil and dirt that has lead from fuel in it. So thank you, Thomas Midgley Jr. You did us a solid. And by the way, Thomas Midgley Jr. lived from May 18th, 1889 to November 2nd, 1944. He was a mechanical and chemical engineer. So, interesting stuff. I really highly recommend you check out that video on YouTube, The Man Who Accidentally Killed the Most People in History. The details that this person put together for this video is insane. Like, if you could pick a person that like, oh, this sounds like a war crime, like this guy really did disrupt the human species. Like, I think that we lost a lot of education ground, and it really kind of explains a lot of, they do a correlation between lead exposure and mental illness and crime rates. And it's really staggering to see, the baby boomer generation was the most impacted by this whole situation. And it's just mind blowing to think about. And I'm going to bring in ChatGPT again. I mentioned it last episode as well. I incorrectly sourced it to Google, but it's not Google. It's owned by a competitor to Google, so my apologies. But yeah, let's see what ChatGPT has to say about this. What are the most common ways people are exposed to lead?
People are most commonly exposed to lead through 1. Lead-based paint, especially in older homes where paint chips or dust can be ingested or inhaled. 2. Contaminated drinking water, often from lead pipes or fixtures. 3. Soil contaminated by past use of leaded gasoline or industrial emissions. 4. Occupational exposure in industries like construction, mining, and battery manufacturing. 5. Certain consumer products, such as toys or jewelry with lead-based materials. Do any of these exposure sources surprise you?
The fuel additive surprises me. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. Leaded gasoline was widely used in the past because lead additives helped improve engine performance and reduce wear. However, the combustion of leaded gasoline released lead particles into the air, which then settled into the soil and water. This contributed significantly to environmental lead contamination. The use of leaded gasoline has been phased out in most countries due to its harmful health effects, particularly on children, who are more susceptible to lead poisoning. Despite the ban, the legacy of leaded gasoline remains in contaminated soils, especially near roads and industrial areas. Does this help clarify why leaded gasoline was a significant source of lead exposure?
Yes. What uses of leaded gas? Oh, it's thinking.
Okay, I'll look up more current information about lead exposure from fuel additives. Give me a moment. Leaded gasoline was once a common fuel additive used to improve engine performance by reducing knocking. However, it had severe health and environmental consequences. Lead in gasoline released toxic emissions that polluted the air and settled into the soil, posing serious health risks, particularly to children. These risks include cognitive impairments, cardiovascular diseases, and other severe health issues. Efforts to eliminate leaded gasoline began in earnest in the 1970s, with the United States initiating a phase-out.
It says my connection failed. Ha! Okay, exit that. Let's try this again.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
Are there any industries that still use leaded fuel gasoline?
Yes, leaded fuel is still used in some industries, particularly in aviation. Small piston engine aircraft often use leaded aviation gasoline, also known as avgas. This is because avgas with tetraethyl lead, TL, helps prevent engine knocking and maintains high performance and safety standards for these aircraft. Efforts are underway to develop and certify unleaded alternatives for aviation, but the transition is complex and requires significant regulatory, technical, and logistical changes.
What does lead do to a growing human body?
Lead exposure can have severe and lasting effects on a growing human body, particularly in children. Here are some of the key impacts. 1. Neurological effects. Lead is highly toxic to the nervous system. In children, it can cause cognitive deficits, lower IQ, attention disorders, and behavioral problems. High levels of lead exposure can lead to encephalopathy, which includes symptoms like seizures and coma. 2. Developmental delays. Lead interferes with the normal development of a child's brain and nervous system, leading to learning difficulties and decreased academic achievement. 3. Physical health issues. Lead exposure can cause anemia, as it interferes with the body's ability to produce hemoglobin. It can also affect the kidneys and cause damage to other organs over time. 4. Growth and bone problems. Lead can accumulate in bones and teeth, affecting growth and causing issues such as delayed puberty and reduced bone growth. 5. Cardiovascular problems. Prolonged exposure to lead is linked to hypertension and other cardiovascular issues in later life. Even low levels of lead exposure can be harmful, and no safe blood lead level has been identified. Therefore, preventing exposure, especially in children, is crucial.
How many countries do not ban leaded fuel?
As of July 2021, no countries use leaded fuel anymore. Algeria, the last country still using it, stopped its sale that month, marking the end of leaded petrol use worldwide. This milestone followed a nearly 2-decade-long campaign led by the United Nations Environment Program, UNP, to phase out leaded gasoline globally.
How long does lead take to break down completely in soil?
Lead does not break down or biodegrade in the environment. Instead, it persists indefinitely in soil, binding strongly to soil particles. This means that lead contamination can remain a significant environmental and health hazard for many years, potentially centuries, unless actively removed or remediated through interventions like soil replacement, chemical treatments, or phytoremediation. Lead's persistence in the environment is a major concern because it can continue to pose risks to human health and ecosystems long after the initial contamination occurred. Efforts to manage and mitigate lead contamination are essential to reduce its long-term impact.
What were the largest lead fuel producers?
During the peak years of leaded gasoline production, several major oil companies were the largest producers and distributors of leaded fuel. Key players included 1. Standard Oil ExxonMobil. One of the early adopters of tetraethyl lead as a gasoline additive, Standard Oil played a significant role in the widespread use of leaded gasoline. 2. DuPont. This chemical company, in partnership with General Motors and Standard Oil, was instrumental in producing and promoting tetraethyl lead through the Ethyl Corporation, which they jointly owned. 3. General Motors. GM initially developed and patented the use of tetraethyl lead in gasoline to address engine knocking issues in their vehicles. 4. Ethyl Corporation. Formed by General Motors and Standard Oil, this company was the primary producer of tetraethyl lead additives used in gasoline worldwide. These companies promoted leaded gasoline heavily, leading to its widespread adoption globally until environmental and health concerns led to its eventual phase-out.
How much of the United States is considered high exposure to lead?
Lead exposure continues to be a significant concern in certain areas of the United States, especially in older urban neighborhoods where lead-based paint, lead pipes, and contaminated soil are prevalent. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and other studies indicate that thousands of areas across the country still have high levels of lead exposure risks. These high-risk areas often overlap with communities that are socioeconomically disadvantaged and have higher proportions of racial and ethnic minorities. Efforts to mitigate lead exposure include lowering the screening levels for lead in soil at residential properties, with the EPA recently reducing these levels from 400 parts per million ppm to 200 ppm, and even further to 100 ppm in areas with multiple sources of lead exposure. Despite significant progress in reducing overall lead exposure in the U.S., persistent contamination in certain regions means that lead poisoning remains a critical public health issue that requires ongoing attention and intervention.
How does someone get treated for symptoms of lead exposure?
Treatment for lead exposure primarily focuses on removing the source of lead, reducing lead levels in the body, and addressing any symptoms or complications. Here's how it generally works. 1. Removal from exposure. The first step is to identify and eliminate the source of lead exposure. This could involve professional removal of lead-based paint, replacing lead pipes, or avoiding certain contaminated environments. 2. Chelation therapy. For individuals with high blood lead levels, doctors may use chelation therapy. This involves administering chelating agents, which bind to lead and help remove it from the body through urine. Common chelating agents include EDTA, ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid for adults, and DMSA, dimercaptosuccinic acid for children. 3. Supportive care. Symptomatic treatment for lead poisoning may involve managing specific health issues caused by lead exposure, such as gastrointestinal problems, neurological symptoms, or anemia. This might include medications, dietary changes, and monitoring of blood levels. 4. Nutritional interventions. Ensuring adequate intake of calcium, iron, and vitamin C can help reduce lead absorption and support overall health. A nutritious diet can play a supportive role in managing lead exposure. 5. Monitoring and follow-up. Regular monitoring of blood lead levels is essential to assess the effectiveness of treatment and to ensure that lead levels are decreasing. Ongoing medical follow-up is crucial for managing and mitigating long-term effects. Each case of lead exposure can vary, so treatment is often tailored to the individual's specific situation and severity of exposure.
So, with regard to lead exposure, is it safe for children to play in the dirt?
You have reached the ChatGPT rate limit. Please try again later.
All right. Thank you for your time.
You have reached the ChatGPT rate limit.
And we're done with that. So very, informational, I would say. Really kind of sounds like a hallmark of the American experience. You know, people in disadvantaged, lower socioeconomic locations, living in, dilapidating, vintage spaces, with the remnants of the glory days gone by, as, the rich have moved on to newer and more accommodating properties out west and are rebuilding their empires in the west. Meanwhile, the people of the east and south are stuck digging through their debris. So very, very interesting things to consider. It's amazing how someone can discover something that's truly so groundbreaking, and we can so quickly buy into it, only to then realize that we're killing ourselves with this great invention. And then even when we see that, we still have, smaller examples of that have come since, and personalities that are along the same pattern. That's just really kind of makes you wonder, like, how smart are we? We're being duped many times by some of these great pioneers that, think they're inventing the next sliced bread, but in reality, they're just trying to make a quick buck at our expense. And that is what capitalism is largely about. It's cutting down on the need to involve others and owning all of the elements that go into your final product and your business, and having every element of that in your control, controlling costs and squeezing out the maximum profit. But whole another topic I won't even get into. So check out that awesome video. Great watch. You will find it far more educational than I was able to give it justice. Again, it is called The Man Who Accidentally Killed the Most People in History. It's one of those cool, like, infographic type shows. Really great. I loved it. Sent it to my mom, and they've got a lot of great charts and numbers corresponding to, like, the peak of leaded fuel usage, and then 20 years after that, decline. Then we saw a rise in crime rates and lower IQ scores. Just so many of the societal talking points, I would say, that we've had in the last 100 years happen within this scientific study of leaded fuel. And it's really kind of alarming to see, I guess, how far back we set ourselves because of one person's invention. So check it out. I will think of another exciting topic to discuss and bring your way. Would love to hear from you. If you want to send me a text, 208-391-2808. There's also a new text us feature in the app. It's at the very top of all of the podcast episode descriptions. It's a new service that is through the podcast hosting platform that I subscribe, and it will allow you to message me directly that way if you'd like. So let me know your thoughts. If you have something you'd like me to delve into as well, and see if I can shed some more that's interesting knowledge on, I would love to hear from you. So until next time, stay kind. Nice and kind are very different, but stay kind and nice, whatever floats your boat. So, you have a great one. Happy Memorial Day, everybody. Obviously, today is the day we celebrate the sacrifice of those who gave everything in service of our country. And in my mind, I don't, especially after the pandemic, I don't just limit it to military service members. It is teachers, it is police, nurses, doctors, and of course the military. But anyone who is doing something that makes our society what we want the future to be, makes it better, gives education to those needing to learn something, something that goes beyond flashy uniforms and cheerleaders on Sunday night with the 3-letter acronym organization at the helm. These are people of real value in our society. And, those that fought in wars, died during the pandemic, trying to treat people, giving their best without any thanks. This Memorial Day is for you guys. So until next time, have a good one, and I will talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to Everything with Everett. Connect with Everett and other listeners on Facebook and Twitter at Everett Podcast. Everett would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts by emailing mystory@everettpodcast.com. You can also leave a voicemail or send a text message to 208-391-2808. Choose to listen, speak with kindness, and have a great day.
Hey there, it's Everett. Thank you for taking time to click on the podcast. Definitely appreciate you supporting Everything with Everett. If you've ever thought about sponsoring a podcast, one of those productions that aren't run by the big corporate media, as little as $12 a month can pay for the hosting service of this platform. If you want to do a one-time donation, you can visit the sponsor of this podcast link on the website. It'll take you to the Venmo page, venmo.com/Everett Podcast. If you want to become a named big sponsor, I would totally love to hear from you. Please email advertising@everettpodcast.com. Again, thank you for listening to Everything with Everett. Enjoy this next episode.